Hello everyone! I am Alice of KHR Arts and Cloud Orchid Publishing, and today I want to talk to y'all about the Oak Lawn Public Library Fan Fest. Now, this is one of the library events that Neal and I have done for a few years now. This is a small one-day event. It's honestly just for the afternoon. It's rather short. In the past, we found a lot of success with this event, and we've had our books inducted into this particular library. Unfortunately, this year, things were really different in not the best way. This is unfortunately a trend that Neal and I have noticed with other library events like this one, that interest is really dwindling and sales have just been big goose eggs, just a big fat zero. And unfortunately, after the library events that we've done this year, we've made the executive decision that going forward into 2026, we will not be signing up for them again. This year, these library events were the last ones that we were going to be doing until things seem to change in terms of how the environment is. So let me back it up and explain why we made this executive decision. So a lot of these library events are a minimum of like an hour drive for us, if not more. And then on top of that, we have to load in all of our stuff. And between the two of us, we have a lot of books. So even when it is a single table event like this, it's still a lot to bring, a lot to set up for only a few short hours. So load in typically starts at about 8 a.m. for these events. So that means it's a really early wake up time to drive all the way out for such an early load in for a one-day event. And then once we get all set up, the event typically starts somewhere between 11 a.m. and noon for these type of library events. And then they typically only go from about 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. So this particular one was much the same. They're typically only about 3 to 5 hours. That's really not a lot of time. Honestly, setup, packing, load in, all of that takes more time than the actual event itself, which can be really frustrating. That's also part of why we've made the executive decision to not do these events anymore, is because the juice is not worth the squeeze. When it takes more time and more effort to do all of the lead up than the actual event itself, and then the fact that we're not making any money doing these events anymore, it really says a lot about what exactly is the viability of us doing these events. On top of this, I'm becoming more physically disabled, so doing these events is becoming harder. And even though a lot of these events, Neal does come with me and help me, there's still a lot of them that I do on my own. And so I have to take that into consideration too, is it worth doing all of this physical effort for me to then spend the next day or even a few days afterward really having my mobility limited from all of the physical effort that I did for the event. Now, for the event itself, a lot of these library events, it's typically that they have some room that they put all the vendors in, and then they will have other sort of like activities. These are usually very family friendly, as these events tend to be very kid centric, which is another one of the reasons why we've made the executive decision to not do these events anymore, is that in the past, our main audience for book sales came from the parents that bring these kids to these events. So these events are typically very focused around kids. They have little kid costume contests, they have little crafting activities, just a lot of the activities and a lot of the presentations and just vibe of the events is very much for young children. We're talking like 3 to 10-year-olds. And that's just really not our audience. At the youngest, our books are really for like 15, 16-year-olds, and sometimes that's even pushing it. Our books, our audience really is adults. And so in the past, the adults that would bring these kids to these events really appreciated our booth because it was a bit of an oasis from all of the little kids stuff featured at the event, that it was something that they could look over and buy for themselves and enjoy. May. And unfortunately, with the way that things have been going, especially because this particular event took place in May, and this is when all of the craziness with the back and forth with the tariffs were going, and people were really worried about what finances were going to look like. And so people just really were not buying things. So on top of that, not only did the adults not buy anything for themselves, but they typically only bought 1 or 2 things for their kids, and that was it. A lot of the other vendors at these events, we would ask around, and a lot of them also didn't do great at these events either, even though these events are usually a big cash grab for them if they are the type of vendor that sells cute little tchotchkes and crocheted items that little kids absolutely love. So that, I feel, is the telltale sign that the people who are the target audience for this event, sales aren't going well for them. That means sales aren't going to go well for anybody. Now, I do want to mention how important it is to support your local library. Libraries need so much help right now with the way that the current political, social, everything climate is. Libraries are struggling. Libraries are being hit hard by all of this nonsense, with all of the book bans, with all of the calls for different kinds of books to be removed, with people going out of their way to check out books and then destroy them. Just all sorts of ridiculousness. Libraries need help more than ever. But the crux of it is, we also have to consider what's best for us on a personal level, and there's other ways that we can support libraries that don't involve us doing all of this hullabaloo of bringing all of our stuff out for an event that's barely even half of a day that we won't make any sales at. So I do want to take this moment right here to please reach out to your local library, see what they need help with most. A lot of local libraries need money for more books and services. A lot of libraries need book donations. A lot of libraries need volunteers for a lot of their programs, especially for after-school programs for kids, and especially for programs for elderly, disabled, homeless. The list goes on. There are so many services that are so necessary that are under attack at local libraries. And honestly, volunteering and offering monetary help and also spreading the word about these kinds of services is going to make far more of an impact than me and Neal just showing up for a singular afternoon with our books in a shutaway room where the rest of the patrons at the library likely aren't going to see us anyway. So absolutely, I will be doing my best here on out, as well as Neal will be, to continue to promote these events, to continue to rally for support for local libraries and their services. We just won't be participating in these particular events anymore. And to be perfectly honest, I don't think our participation will be missed. Unfortunately, that's one of the other factors in us pulling out of doing these events, is that we've noticed the more of these library events that we've done over the past year and even last year, the fewer authors that are actually at these events, which is very frustrating because originally these events were supposed to showcase small indie authors, and the library had a symbiotic relationship with these authors where the librarians of the library would then take a moment and come through, and they would earmark books to be inducted into the library, and they would encourage people at the event to check out the books because it's a library. And they also made a big show of telling everybody, hey, and if you can't afford to buy the books, a lot of them are going to be inducted into the library, or from years past already are. Please ask. And on top of that, if people see books that they like at the event, they can specifically request for them to be inducted into the library. We as authors can't ask for our books to be inducted into the library this way, but if other people request our books, they can be inducted that way. The interest has to be there for the library to deign to take books. Unfortunately, the processes make that a lot more difficult now, which is why I'm sure that they have moved away from this model with all of the book bans and fear-mongering that communities and politicians and people that are just up to no good are putting pressure on these libraries that, oh no, think of the children, and we can't have those sorts of books and these sorts of books and blah, blah, blah. And so many libraries are scared to induct new books books into their library for fear that it will cause some sort of uproar because of the subject matter, because of the author, because of some sort of agenda that other people see that may or may not exist in the book, just all of that nonsense. So unfortunately, because that relationship has really broken down, a lot of authors are not participating in these events anymore, because if they don't even have the golden ticket opportunity to have their books inducted into the library, if they're not making sales, there's no reason for them to be there. We were kind of the last holdout. We were some of the last authors that were at these events, and unfortunately, we're going to have to pull the plug and we're going to have to say goodbye too. And it really, really sucks, because I love doing these local library events. I love reaching out to the local community and meeting people at the most basic local level like this. But at the end of the day, if we're not making money doing them, why are we doing it? If people aren't interested in our books, if the libraries can't take our books, we're not making sales, what are we doing? We're just sitting there at a booth being ignored. And that's the largest thing, is that while we do have fantastic stories from a lot of these events of making real amazing connections with the people at these events, largely we now spend about 90% of these events sitting there just talking to each other and our booth just getting passed by. Now, make no mistake, this is not in terms of that we are not doing all we can to attract attention to our booth, to be welcoming and all of that. We're very good at selling our books. We're very good at the whole con presence attitude of waving, smiling, saying hello with our catchphrases. Hey, come on over, the books don't bite. Hey, these books have pictures in them. Why don't you come take a look? All those sorts of things. And the fact of the matter is that people just hurry on by because they don't want to buy books, because it's likely a couple of parents or even a single parent and they've got kids in tow and the kids aren't interested in the books. They're interested in the cute little tchotchkes or shiny things at the next booth over. And so they rush on by. It has nothing to do with us. It just has to do with the way that the environment is right now. And so it's one of those things where you kind of have to look around and take stock and ask yourself, is this worth it? What am I getting out of this? What am I putting back into the community by doing this? And the fact that we no longer have that symbiotic relationship with the libraries, and the fact that we're no longer making connections with the community, and we're not making sales, it really does beg the question, why are we doing this? And so unfortunately, this event was no different. We spent the majority of the event with nothing to do, no people to interact with. We had 0 sales. It was very disheartening. The only sales we did have were a couple for Neal, and that was just because the happenstance that one of Neal's old longtime friends showed up. They hadn't seen each other in, I'm not even kidding, years, had a wonderful conversation, and of course they bought a couple of Neal's books because they're friends. Other than that fluke incident, it would have been an absolute washout for this particular event. And on top of it, the fact that it's just such a physically demanding thing to do and my disability is increasing, we have to be more and more selective about the events that we do, because it takes such a big toll on both of us, because Neal is having to do more and more of the physical work for me, doing all of the schlepping and the setting up for these events, because it's becoming harder for me to do it by myself. All of those things come into consideration for why we aren't doing these events anymore. And honestly, the biggest way that we can have this change and for it to be viable for us to do these events again is for people to really step up and support the local libraries. We need that interest again in people being excited about libraries and people being excited about books. That is the key ingredient that's missing here. And it just feels so upside down that these are library events that people are attending and they don't care about the library or books. I'll give you all an example of one of the library events that I did last year that was really, really frustrating for me, and it was really kind of the beginning of the end for me on me starting to float the idea of not doing these events anymore. And it was because this event was so incredibly bad that was what my really big wake-up call was. And I did consider, is it just I don't want to do this particular library event anymore, or all all of them. And then as the procession just went on, that each event just kept getting goose eggs and sales, kept being ignored by the people that would deign to attend the events. And that's the other thing, attendance is low. Attendance is lower than it has ever been at these library events. And that's the other part of it, is that if people aren't there, what exactly are we doing there? If we just have a room full of vendors staring at each other and no people to interact with or make sales from, it's just, we're just taking up space. That's about it. So the particular event that was a wake-up call for me, and I won't mention the name of the library because honestly, I do feel that they had the best of intentions with these ideas. And unfortunately, in practice, for a library event for authors, it just turned out to be an absolute nightmare. The first problem was that they had a raffle. Now, ordinarily, raffles are great. Raffles can generate a lot of interest. This past month, I went to the Getting Witchy With It in New Orleans, and they had a raffle where people could donate items, and all of the proceeds went to a local animal shelter, which I absolutely love that. I love that when the money goes to charities like that. In this case, the money for the raffles went to the library because the library needs funding too. That is absolutely a charity that I support. However, because the items were not things donated by the vendors, so this means that there is zero interest being driven for the vendors. The interest is that if you win a book or a tchotchke or a crocheted item or whatever, you're going to be like, wow, I really like this thing. Who's the person that made this? I really want more of this. That's the benefit of vendors being able to donate their items for a raffle, is that the winner is likely going to enjoy that free thing and then probably seek out more of the stuff. However, at this event, they raffled off high-ticket items that brought people in who would have never come to an event like this. But I do need to stress this, y'all. This is one of the big reasons why I don't do giveaways or contests or anything like that, is for this exact reason, is these are the type of people who are just looking for a freebie. They are not going to support anything. They are just looking for free stuff. And that is the kind of people that came to this event, and it was horrific. They raffled off things like Nintendo Switches and TVs and other gaming consoles and video games for those consoles and other little electronic device things. Absolutely horrible. That has nothing to do with libraries. It has nothing to do with events. It has nothing to do with indie creators. It has nothing to do with supporting any of the things for the reasons why people are there that day. So of course, a bunch of people looking for freebies are going to come to this event hoping they can score one of the big ticket items for free. So attendance at that event was absolutely outrageous. There were so many people, it was so crowded, but they didn't care about the vendors, and in fact, they actually blocked a lot of vendors from being able to make sales from the people who were there for the event, because as part of this raffle, how to participate, and bless the library, they thought they were helping, it was not helping. They made the raffle be that there was a map of all of the vendors, and every vendor was given a stamp, and the vendors had to find themselves on this little raffle map and put their stamp on their square, and then when the people filled out all the squares with all the stamps on their little map, they won one of the raffle items. And so I spent the entire event, I'm not even kidding, literally having pieces of paper thrown in my face for stamps, people yelling at me to hurry up so that they could possibly win a TV or a Switch or whatever, while I'm trying to talk to people who are genuinely interested in my books. It took everything in my free will, in my power, to not scream at these people and rip up their stupid little maps. It was outrageous. People were abhorrent in their behavior, in the way that they treated me, and the way they treated other vendors, and honestly, the way that they treated the event. It was a free-for-all. It was chaos. I will never do an event at that library ever again because of that event, because it was just such a bad experience. And I feel bad for saying that, but I just cannot do another chaos event like that ever again. But that was really the beginning of the end for me, is that it really shows that these libraries are getting desperate to try to bring people in, and unfortunately some of the ways that they choose to do that end up being detrimental to the cause and detrimental to the people who are actually there for the right reasons. That was really the beginning of the end for me, and since then, unfortunately, I mean, thankfully, knock on wood, we didn't have another crazy crazy chaos event like that again. However, just a lot of the programming and a lot of the things that they were offering at a lot of the library events we went to since then did a lot of the same. They brought in people that were there for that specific thing and nothing else. They didn't bring in real traffic. And that's really the crux of the problem, is that these libraries are trying. They're very much trying. They're trying to be creative, trying to get new people in. And unfortunately, people are just not responding accordingly. It is just selfishness and everybody for themselves at its finest. And it sucks. This is how we see things, is we're going to see it at these small community service level places first. And it's just going to keep going up the chain. And as we've seen with the abomination that just recently got passed, it truly is everybody for themselves and just selfishness run amok at this point. And so unfortunately, because of all that, we just had to make the decision to step away. That it's until we can find that there are events again with an environment that is conducive to what we do and makes sense for us to do it, we're just going to have to step away and really spend our energy elsewhere. Like I said, we're still going to support libraries, just in different ways. I hope that other vendors will still continue to support the events and the libraries. I just don't see authors supporting these library events anytime soon with the current climate and the fact that it's tougher than ever for authors to get their books inducted into libraries, which is the big reason why we do these events. With this particular event, like I said, attendance was very low and people that were there really weren't interested in buying things. From what I saw, I could be wrong, I may have missed a table. Neal and I were the only authors at this particular event. Some of the vendors were trying to say, oh, you know, it's probably because it was the first nice day of summer. People were out wanting to do stuff. I'm sure if it had rained that day, we would have had a better turnout, blah, blah, blah. But that's the thing, is there's always an excuse with the weather, isn't there? If it's nice and bright and sunny out, oh, people didn't want to come because it's such a nice day. If it's raining, oh, people didn't want to come. They didn't want to brave the rain. If it's cold out, oh, it was too cold. It was too snowy. It was too this. It was too that. It's not the weather. Unfortunately, it's not the weather. It's just the way that things are going right now. And this is the same sort of thing that I had to do when I tried to get back out there in 2021. Unfortunately, you just have to wait. You have to wait for things to get better, because I did a library event back in 2021, right when things were starting to open up again. And there were only a handful of vendors at that event that were able to feel safe enough to brave it. And there were no attendees. No one showed up. It was just a handful of vendors just sitting in a room, just being like, what should we do? Do we leave? Do we wait? What do we do? And we all ended up just waiting until it was long enough that we could say, well, we gave it a good try. And sometimes that's just what you have to do. You just have to bide your time, wait for things to get better, and try again. And that's what I did. Things started to get better in 2022. 2023, things started to pick up again. And then 2024, unfortunately, was when things started to get kind of iffy. And now things are bad again. On top of us deciding not to go to the library events anymore, Neal and I are going to start being very selective about all of the events that we choose to participate in because of the way that things are pointing. Recently, the Chicago Steampunk Expo that we did had very low attendance. So regardless of whatever sales we could make, you can't make sales if the people aren't there to buy things. And that was the biggest problem with that event. And it wasn't their fault. It's just the way that things are right now with all of the crazy. And so we might have to put things on pause, depending on how long that goes into, whether it's 2026, 2027, 2028, who knows? I am going to continue to try out new events to try and reach new audiences, because at the end of the day, we can't do nothing. We absolutely can't do nothing. That's not an option. We just need to be more judicious in how we select the events that we're going to do moving forward. That will be a thing going forward with our con circuit, is keep an eye out for that. We are going to be doing different events. You're likely not going to see us at events that you would likely have seen us at in the past. And we're really going to be going further afield. We are going to be concentrating more on doing more more out-of-state events, because as I've said in the past about part of the reason why we're not doing WinnieCon and Capricorn anymore is because we've kind of already sucked that market dry. It's when once everybody in the locale has already bought your book, unless you come out with another book, who is there to buy your books if they've already bought all of them? We're doing our best to kind of balance that with being more judicious about which events that we want to choose to do, trying to still grow our audience, and just honestly taking the pulse after every event we do and decide from there. So be sure to follow our social media channels so that you can keep up with what our con circuit is going to look like, because it is definitely going to rapidly evolve after every event that we do, and it's definitely going to look a lot different by 2026. Another part of the reason why this really was the event that was the final straw on the camel's back, unfortunately, is this was a part of, as I've been calling it, the busiest week ever TM. So this particular week was the week where I had 2 photo shoots, I had the library event, I had a day where I had to shoot all of the content for my Instagram, for my influencer work. I think it was something like 20 videos of content for that. It was also, we had a bunch of other stuff that we had to do too, personal stuff, and then on top of it, we also had to do all the planning for the Chicago Steampunk Expo. All of that in a single week. Most of that stuff being crammed into that Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So also on top of it, the fact that we are busier than ever, and we had an event that was largely, unfortunately, a waste of time for the both of us. Time we could have spent doing literally anything else for our other events, for our other work, our other projects, or even just, I don't know, taking a minute, taking a breather for ourselves. That is a big part of also why we're looking into what events are we going to cut from our con circuit, is that our time and effort is more precious than ever, and we're busier than ever. So we really have to evaluate what is going to make the cut. I hope y'all enjoyed this video. If you did, please be sure to give it a like. And if you're new, subscribe. All right, y'all, thank you so much for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.